In the second season of the Afterlife Files, we have looked at how we can take those skills learned in the non-physical universe and bring them into the physical universe. Hakim has taken this concept to a whole new level. He is the founder of the Psi Games, which seeks to unlock human potential. In this interview, I want you to pay particular attention to how he teaches and develops these 5 skills: mind sight, remote viewing, psychokinesis, precognition, and dowsing. Here's his bio. Hakim Isler is a consciousness explorer dedicated to developing human potential beyond conventional limits. With extensive experience in remote viewing, mind sight training, and holistic development, Hakim bridges ancient disciplines with modern scientific inquiry. As an instructor and thought leader, he works to empower individuals through martial arts, Psi training, and experiential learning. He is also the founder of Psi Games, bringing together experts and enthusiasts in the field of consciousness and psychic abilities to share, test, and grow this field together. I know you're going to be really interested in this interview, and I think it will challenge what our perceptions are about what we are capable of. Here's Hakim Isler. Hakim, welcome to the Afterlife Files. We have been really looking forward to having you with us.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm really glad that you had me come on this show, and I hope that I can be of some value to folks who see this episode.
So let's start off by telling us your story. Who are you? How did you get interested in this kind of thing?
I guess it depends on what you mean by this kind of thing, but
That was purposely vague.
oh, okay. So I am, I'm from North Carolina. I moved to Ohio before I moved to North Carolina. I was a kid that grew up in New Jersey, moved to Ohio to study this ninja martial arts. So I became a ninja, right? Um, Through that, I started to get a lot of esoteric training and different aspects of ninja training, wilderness experiential training. And from there, I joined the Army to become a PSYOP specialist. And PSYOP is, this field you hear a lot now. People talk about it a lot now as this faction or that faction is PSYOPing us. But it's to persuade, change, and influence the hearts and minds of a foreign target audience, and that's basically what the job is. And so I did that for a couple years, and then got out and started a martial arts school, and which I still have today, as well as doing a lot of wilderness remote training. Been on several television shows as a survival expert, like shows like Naked and Afraid and Kicking and Screaming and things of that nature, where I got to go into the wild and survive for many days on end. And as far as the remote or the mind sight remote viewing and the things that I've done in the consciousness space, several years ago, outside of my ninja training, several years ago, at my school, I started recognizing that youth were doing these finger tyings, or what we know as mudra. And then they would say these words, or what we call mantra. And they were pretending to be these animation characters on television. And I'd say, "Oh, I know, in our martial arts, we have things like that." And they would say, "Oh, yeah, well, show me, show me how to, do this, and then have these experiences where I have these abilities." And I was like, I didn't have anything for them, like for me, it was like, hey, just follow your teacher and out in the woods for 25 years, and maybe you'll have an experience. And that, for a young person, is just like, they're like,
I'm thinking, no,
Yeah. I'm thinking
tomorrow would be good enough. Yeah.
yeah. So I started looking at, well, how do we, this is a ability these abilities are things that we have. The ability to see things in other time and spaces, the ability to see without your eyes or sense danger as it's coming, or sense other things in our space and in our worlds, the ability to touch and heal, and all of these things. But we don't have enough interest from youth to really keep this going. And what really happens quite often in our American society is that because it's not the norm, like other cultures may have it as partly ingrained in their culture, is that kids will find this or have these experiences. They'll talk to their parents about it. And if their parents are on, like a majority of folks in the world, in our world, in the United States, they have a pretty high probability of having their parents say either that's not real, it's your imagination, or it's evil,
Ooh.
shouldn't be messing with evil. And or they don't tell their parents at all. They go into, with their friends, and their friends aren't doing it. So then they say, well, why is this happening? Let me shut it down. So they shut it down. Then we become in our, adults in our 30s and 40s and 50s. And then we have an awakening moment where we say, whoa, there's something more to this life. Oh, yeah, I remember I could do this when I was 8, but I stopped doing it. And so now you have 30 years that have gone by where you haven't even tried to explore this. And now we're trying to explore it on the back end of our lives. So, how can we form and build a community where there's this, instead of there being this gap, it's just a consistent, continuous growth in this space. And the way you do that is, in my opinion, I said I have to find protocols that allow kids and adults to have experiences with this now so that they can know it's real, undoubtedly, and nobody can tell them it's not. And then they can start growing in this particular field and grow to the next stage of what we want to call, a human potential, advanced human potential. So that's what started me down the rabbit hole, and that's where I am now. So
When you say protocols, is is this associated with your games or is this something else?
all of the above. So with the original protocols that I'm talking about were just like, let's say I want to teach a child or an adult how to see things in another time and space that they would not otherwise have access to. That would be what we know as remote viewing, and remote viewing has protocols that go along with it. Now you have different methodologies, but the protocols should be the same based on the way they designed them. And so you teach people those protocols, they have that, they do those protocols, they have an experience, and then they're able to grow with that experience. And that's basically what I mean. And now that is translated into or transition into what I'm doing with the games, where we'll have protocols and methodologies that people can use during the games to help them, solve the challenges that we give them. So.
And so when you teach somebody remote viewing, how young do you start them?
So I have not taught remote viewings per se to youth, but I think that you can start them younger, and there are people who do that. I teach more of a mind sight, the blindfolded, seeing without your eyes, which sometimes can have this cross boundary, or can cross over into like a remote viewing type thing, where people aren't actually seeing completely with their eyes. They actually perceive what's happening locally or non-locally. When they're like in this particular case, if I have a card up, you can't actually see the card, but you just know what card it is. And that would be more of remote, that would be more like localized, like a remote viewing mechanism than it is necessarily your ability to actually see without your eyes and know exactly
So,
what's happening,
so
you know?
talk a little bit more about that mindsight, that ability to see without your eyes. And what does that look like? Or yeah, how do people do that? How do kids do it?
You're supposed to say no pun intended when you say, what does that look like?
I was trying to sneak that in, just, you know.
What is it like when you can't see without your eyes? What does that look like?
And what does that look like? Yeah.
So yeah, when you're doing mind sight, and I would assume for other people it's different. You know, everybody is different. Talking to some individuals, I actually is not an assumption. I actually know. Um, but for the most part, when you have a full awakening, meaning that you're fully open, your eyesight is fully open, or we don't say eyesight, but your mind sight is fully open. You're able to see it in real time as it is. You're just not using your eyes, ocular perception. So you're using something else, some other mechanism. Some people say that it's the pineal gland or other things that are happening. But you're seeing it.
So what, you're like wearing blindfolds
Yeah. Yeah. Patches,
and then
blindfold, mask on, all that. And so
so
eyes
no
aren't
chance to
any
see
light. Yeah. And but yet you're able to see these things.
like
And
yeah, like what are these kids seeing?
yeah, yeah. So in this particular case, we'll use like colors, we'll use objects, we'll use circle, square, we'll use shapes. So that's what we are training the youth with and the adults with, and they can sense or see those things.
I've heard that mindsight is easier to learn as a child and harder to learn as an adult, and it drifts off as you get older. Is that true?
Many of the skills are based on what we know, and that's only because that as children, we're operating primarily from the right side of our brain, right? And so we are in this very creative, we're absorbing, we're taking in the world and all of the things with it. And then, as we become adults, we start to formulate or rely more on the left side of the brain, this kind of idea of um, this logic and reason and this very fact-based or what we call hard-based information, like, hey, 2 + 2 = 4, this is solid because I can touch it. And you start to rely on that as a way to navigate your world a lot more. And so, at that moment in time, we start to shut off or not use the muscle, which is the right brain, and start and really diving into that and really owning that space. Some people are able to maintain it. Those tend to be creatives, people who paint or do music or these type of things, and they kind of spend more time doing that than they do like, answering questions at their, law firm, or doing mathematical equations as an engineer of some sort, or whatever the case may be. So they're not dealing with reason on this in the same way that a person who's in these kind of different fields would be.
So if
And
you're trying
so that's why we think that happens. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
so if you're trying to activate the right side of the brain, does technology like binaural beats help with mindsight?
Yeah, so binaural beats and things like hemisync, which allow you to activate or change or entrain the brain with these different frequencies, allows you to find frequencies that are conducive to you being able to move into those spaces. So if we say, for instance, like a high gamma state is like the state that many of people who are performing these feats are in, then using a binaural beats will help you entrain your brain to move into that state. And therefore, if you're moving into that state, you're going to be more likely to have success at these things. So, yes, yeah.
So if you do nothing but coding all day on a computer, there's hope for you.
There is hope for you. It's always hope. The human mind and body are very resilient. It's not that it's like, for instance, I can learn to speak a language now, even though, let's say I've never spoken another language in my whole entire life. And I choose now to start doing that. It's going to be harder, but it's still possible. But if you do it when you're a child, it's going to be way easier.
Yep.
And they have studies that say that. So it's not that it's not possible. It's just that it's going to be a little bit more difficult because you have to develop those neural pathways and myelinate those circuits and do all that business. So that's where we are.
So, in your training, either in the military or wilderness or psyops, you have a bunch of really interesting backgrounds. There must have been some moments of insight that was like, "Oh, wow, this is just way cool."
Yeah, yeah. So I guess it would really mean, I would need you to kind of specify from which one of those areas because they all have, like you said, they all have their moments where I was just like mind blown.
So, okay, in in this season of the Afterlife Files, we're interested in bringing those skills of the non-physical world into the physical. Um, when was the time when you looked at that? Something happened to you and you went, "Wow, I can actually do that. I can bring that back and make uh, an impact here in the physical world."
Yeah, so I think, I've had that moment several times, one being in remote viewing and the other being in um this mindset. But early on, when I was young, I had very specific abilities. And so in one instance, I was able to dream the lottery. And I woke up and told my mom, and she played it locally and not nationally. And it came out nationally, but not locally.
Oh no.
Yeah, had it come out nationally, locally we would have won some money. Nationally, we would have been multimillionaires.
And then
Uh,
I never would have met you. So,
yeah, never, because I'd be off and gallivanting, being a spoiled rich kid. So doing that thing. No, but yeah, so I had that happen. I also told my mom, she asked me when I was a kid, her and my aunt, they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to be a ninja." Right. And they all laughed and thought, "Oh, there's no such thing." And I forgot about it. Like, because I thought as I grew older and I started to move more into my logic brain, I started to believe, "Oh, yeah, that's right. That was all cartoon stuff. That's not like a real thing." And so when I came back to her at like 21, 22, and I said, "I'm going to move to Ohio to train with this ninja guy full time." And the way that came about in my life, because I forgot about it. A friend brought it up when I was telling him I wanted to dedicate my life to martial arts. I was like, "Is that real?" He was like, "Yeah." I looked it up and then found my teacher. And now here we are, all these years later, and the way I've made my living for the past 17 years is by teaching ninjutsu. You know, and so I knew on some level at a 9-year-old kid that throughout all of the things that I was going to do, that was going to be the thing that I was going to become.
and you didn't even look like a turtle.
I didn't. Well, when I was younger, if you see some pictures, no.
So, how did the idea of Psi Games come about? And, kind of what does that look like? Sorry
Yeah,
to use
so
that again.
so Psi Games was really a download. It really came to me. I was reading some of Ingo Swan's books, and then I had this moment where I was just like, um, if we were to have this game where we came together and we saw what was going on with different abilities from perspectives of other people, but all in the same space, maybe we could really develop into the next level of our consciousness, right? And then I said to myself, well, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy. I got all this stuff happening and so on and so forth. It just came out of nowhere. It's a great idea, but I get ideas all the time. So I just left it alone. And it just kept through synchronicities, it just kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And before I knew it, I was like, whoa, this is something that needs to be done. Um, and I'm a yoga practitioner, and one of the ways that we do yoga therapy is we have this thing called appropriation, differentiation, and application. So you have to So first you have to differentiate each person. You have to find the appropriate things for them, and then you have to apply it. And then there's one other overarching theme, and that is to meet people where they are.
Hmm.
Meet people where they are. And so we're out here saying to ourselves, well, this kid is spending 8 hours on the computer, and we really need this kid to meditate so that they can learn more about who they are on the inside and become very, a lot more, so they have less anxiety and less depression and all this stuff. But the answer to that is not to say, let me take this away and make you go sit in a room, right? Because that's actually going to build more anxiety and more depression and everything else. The
Yeah,
answer,
besides, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
yeah, it doesn't sound like
Yeah,
fun. So
thanks, Hakeem. Really, really nice.
right? Not liking you right now. So the answer is like, let's meet them where they are. So let's give them something that is fun, exciting. They have mentorship, they have community. And then when this kid says, I like this stuff, seeing without my eyes is kind of cool. And I got a community that backs it up and supports me and thinks that I'm cool because I can do it. And how can I do more? Well, actually, the way I know how to do more is to spend some more time, maybe a little time meditating and clearing up whatever would be getting in your way. And really thinking about it and embodying it using this idea of what we call in ninjutsu sanmitsu is thought, word, and deed. So I'm thinking it, I'm saying it, I'm doing things. And now they go from 8 hours on the computer to taking one of those hours and maybe reflecting on how to get better at the skill set, which ultimately is leading them more internally and inside, which ultimately, hopefully, is getting them uh, uh, more into this idea of cleaning out the things that can get in the way, and the work will be done on its own with them spending more time internally. And so, and that goes for adults too. There's a plethora of adults coming around saying, I am overwhelmed, I can't, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have this, that, and other. And when you start to think about that, it's like they don't have strong communities sometimes. They're spending a lot of time just staring at their phone. They're, they're not spending a lot of internal reflection time. I hear so much from people. I tried to meditate, but I can't do it. I hate quiet time. I hate being in my thoughts and all of that stuff. When digging through the muck is really what they need to do, and get there. So maybe we can find fun ways to motivate people to do that. And the side games seem like a perfect answer to that.
So, is Psi Games an actual competition, or is it a way for an individual to do your work?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it is a competition. It's where people will get together and they will compete in these psychic abilities. And I know in our American culture, because of the way we are, when we think competition, we think negative. We think that it has to be something like I'm a winner, you're a loser, or so on and so forth.
Oh,
And really, what it could be, and I think that's culture specific. I think that if you build a culture of love and collaboration and communication and community around competition, then that's what you get. But if you build a "I'm better than you, you suck" attitude around it, or like sometimes which would happen in the army, which is the people who can't do it, who are weak, get weeded out, and the people who can, we cheer each other on and say we're the strongest. Um, this is about inspiration, where we look and we say, Scott can do something I didn't even think was possible, but I'm watching him do it, and he's doing it better than most of us. Now that makes me go home and say, wow, Scott can do that, then I could do that. Let me start to spend some time, because now I'm motivated and inspired to understand more about who I am and more about how I can reach a higher level of potential for myself. So now we're inspiring each other through this kind of idea of competition and play, you know?
so how does that work? Is it over a weekend? What kind of events are there? Describe an event.
Yeah, so We have it's going to be over a weekend. We have our first day is going to be mostly lectures and workshops. So if a person's interested in like they're like, I don't even know where to start with this thing, they can come and learn from the best who have been doing this. That's where the mentorship part comes in, right? So we're going to have strong mentors who are grounded, who've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. They've been doing this research and they've been immersed in these different fields. So there's the mentorship. Then on Saturday, we'll have some keynote speakers, but primarily the games where we have individual events where people can, compete as individuals, or we'll have team events where people can compete as teams. And those are in five different categories, which is psychokinesis, remote viewing, precognition, dowsing, and then mindsight. So those are the five, right? And so as an individual, if you're competing in an individual genre, you could choose which ones you want to compete in. And as a team, you take there's five members on your team and you choose which person will actually compete in that particular genre, that skill. So you and I, if we're on the same team, can't both do remote viewing. Only one of us would be chosen for the remote viewing, task. So that's basically how we work it.
And are the teams organized ahead of time, or is this random drawing? How does that work?
Yeah, so what we're asking is that teams come in together. So if you're on a team, you apply as a team and then you continue on as a team. If you come in as an individual, you apply as an individual and then you go from there. So that's how we're doing it.
So those five events, um, like, give me an example of what happens in each one. I mean, what's a mind sight event look like?
Yeah, that's a great
Sorry,
question.
I, I
What it
can't
looks
resist. It's great.
like. Well, so I can't divulge the the details of the game per se, because we do want the games to be a little surprising when they come there, and that's part of it. However, what I could say is that, like, if you go through a mindset training, it might be sorting colors, right? So I'll have like five colored cards on the desk or on the table, and I need you to pick out all the yellow ones, or I have a series of cards that are in the deck, and I need you to pick them up and tell me one by one which one is which. And the more you do, the more points you get. So those type of things would be things that, we would consider the mind sight games, or remote viewing. You would have to tell me what's at a particular location and give me details about that. And the person who gives the most details might, be the one who gets the most points. So that's basically how we would go about that.
Psychokinesis, what's that look like?
So psychokinesis is your ability to move things with your mind or influence matter with your mind. And so they have a number of different events out there. One of the teachers who's going to be there, I know he's going to be doing an example in his workshop, but you could take like a piece of aluminum foil and put it on a pen, put it under a dome, and like try to make that thing spin one way or the other. And that means that because it's under a dome, we know it's not air or wind or you blowing on it in some weird way to cheat. It's like, oh no, it's under this dome, so it's airtight in there. It's just this thing. And my ability, my will is what in mind is what's going to be used to influence this thing.
Okay, that's three of the events. What are the last two?
So we got precognition, your ability to see things in the future before they happen, or events before they happen, or at least gain information of those events before they happen. And then your dowsing, your pendulum
Oh yeah,
dowsing,
dowsing. That's right.
your ability to tell me what is at a particular location. So if I had, like what they did in the old Army program is they might have a map and they say, hey, a plane went down somewhere in this area. I need you, and we got four or five areas that we think it's in, but we don't want to waste the resources to go to all four of them. So we need to get you to give me the most likely one that we can go to. And then you would pendulum dowse and see. I hear, and I don't know him personally, but I hear Uri Geller he made a lot of money off of being hired by oil companies and mining companies who said, "Hey, we want to drill in this general area, but we need instead of drilling thousands of holes, can you narrow it down to like two holes that or two areas that we can drill in?" And he
It
was
saved them a lot of money for,
yeah.
you
And he
know.
was able to use dowsing as a means to do that. And he found several areas in which he got a percentage of whatever came out of that hole.
And precognition, what's a game look like?
Well, I don't know what a game would look like for the Psi Games, but I could tell you what I could tell you what a precognition event would be if you were to go to a school to learn this. And that would be like you would you would have like two choices, or multiple choices, and you could say, "Hey, which group wins this game tomorrow? Which basketball team wins this game tomorrow?" Or how often does this basketball team win? And now some of that could be guessing, but if you do that multiple times in multiple arenas, and you get, let's say you do it 5 times and you get all five right, then that's well above chance, right?
Right.
That's not chance anymore. And if you get four right, you're still above chance. If you get two right, then maybe not. But if you get if and the more often you can do that, the more likely it is that you're being precognitive than it is that you're just doing it by random chance.
So, as a human being learning these types of skills, I suppose, A, why do it? And what's the benefit?
Yeah. So I think you hit it right on the head. It's not actually a human being doing these type of things. It's actually the cliche, a human actually being. Like, so we are being what we're meant to be. And so why do we need to justify learning how to read or justify learning how to walk? It's just part of your natural evolution and growth as a human being. And so the same thing here. So the more in touch we get with these abilities that we have, the more efficiently and better we can operate in our own communities. Once I know, once I'm tapped into my full potential, it changes the dynamic of the world. A lot of times, and this is a very rudimentary way to think about it. So I don't want people to think, oh, I'm talking about it's all about money, because it's not. But one of the best things I heard going through a financial course was that, hey, if you want to be really impactful and help, yeah, I can have no money, go out and give my last piece of bread to a person who needs it, right? Who I feel like needs it more than me or is starving more than I am. But now I'm hungry, right? But it would be way better if I had enough bread in my cabinet to feed me and my family, and then would could buy extra and then go out and give it to people. So the more I've grown in, let's say, the financial world or in the wealth in my life, wealth and health in my life, the more I can give back. The more I know who I truly am, and the more I know how I'm truly connected, the more I can actually give back to the world. So, and that is the ultimate why. The ultimate why is that I am able to be a greater, I don't want to say warrior, but I am able to be a greater inspiration and connection and being in this world who can also then give back and to connect to others as well. And so that's what I think it ultimately is not about the game. It's not about just being able to see things in different times and places, although that's cool. It's what you really realize when you start doing that. When I know I can see a thing in the future or in the past, or I can influence something that is matter, or I can uh, see what's going on in your house when we're not over Zoom, then it really sparks, it brings to forward the idea that I am not separate from everything. I'm actually a part of all of this because that's the only way I can do it. Just the same way when I'm tired, I feel it. And then I say, oh, I am not separate from my body. I am a part of my body. So when I start being able to realize that I can see things in different times and places and interact with matter around me, then I start saying, whoa, there's a greater knowledge here. There's a greater inclusion. There's a greater um, responsibility to what I'm doing, and how I'm operating in the world because I am not separate from everything. I am everything.
Which begs the question, are there ethical considerations around this as you
Yeah.
explore? Talk about how you train your students around that.
Yeah, and that's the hard part because and sages have warned of this in the past because and there's been people in yoga lore and history where they go through all this work and then they turn out to not be so good people or it can skew their perception of who they are and what their purpose is in the world. And so there's always that fear that somebody is going to go off on a tangent somewhere. But there's also, a greater potential that this person does not have that happen and that they are able to do great things with it. So the ethical concerns about it is, I think, is that would you rather a person gain these skills in the wind, as we would say, meaning that they have no connection to anyone good or anything good in their life, and they see this as a means to gain power and control, and they're doing that completely in isolation. That person is going to be more of a threat because they have no positive influences in their life. Or would you rather a person who has this potential learn about this potential in a community of love and compassion? That person is going to be more likely to then reciprocate and project out that same love and compassion than they are to turn to what we would call in old Star Wars the dark side, you know? So
Dark, you shall not go.
you did that well.
Ah, thank you very much. Yoda, he's a buddy. Um, yes, and I'm touched by the fact that if you're in a community and everybody is committed to service to others, that that is the standard by which people then live their lives and judge how they're doing. Makes a huge difference. So
Yes.
thank you for thinking about that and putting it into action.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah.
How about what's the future of consciousness and consciousness research? Because you're kind of pushing the envelope here. Where do you see it going?
That's great. I don't know. I think that's where I think that's the fun part is like we're not sure how far this can go. But what I can tell you, Scott, is I can tell you that what's really happening in the world right now is there's a shift, there's a paradigm shift. I just came from an event that I was speaking at, but then also just a part, a spectator as well. And there was a guy there who has been on on a few different shows now or YouTube channels, and he's a colonel, and he's been in all these military fields, but he's also worked for as a liaison with all these really high level corporations like Lockheed Martin and things of that nature. And what this gentleman has said very clearly, non-mistakably, is that we are not alone. We, as the U.S. government, has known about non-human intelligences and UAPs, and that they do exist, and that's not an argument anymore, right? Like it's here. And here you have a government guy who still works in the government saying that clearly and saying that's not the problem anymore. What we're trying to figure out is are these things good or bad or or is there a combination or and who's who and all that stuff. That's really where the conversation lies there. And what I see is that we are basically farming out as the American population. We're still farming out our ability to have interactions and to really take on the responsibility of raising our consciousness so that we can then be able to to be a steward, a good steward of, and a good representation of who we are as the human popul species, the human family. And so I'm not saying this in a negative way. I was in the military. I know the military. I appreciate and love and respect the military, but I don't know if I want them to be the first people that or organization that represents me on a universal cosmic stage with something, or interdimensional stage where these things are back and forth, because we tend to want to know what the threat is versus, and which is important too, versus also coming from it as saying, hey, I would love to know what the threat is, but I'm also really, really open to just us being friends, and us having some really decent communication. And when you are coming from a place where you feel weak, where you feel like you lack, it creates this conundrum or this energy where it feels like I'm in danger, or I can't defend myself. And that's a bad place to be. If we get to a level, hopefully with Psi Games and other events like it, where we've raised the consciousness enough for me to walk into a room, like for instance, I always use this. If I'm a high school basketball player and now you tell me to go into the NBA tomorrow and play against Michael Jordan, I'm gonna be like, bro, I'm not even on the level. That's so scary to me. But if I've done the work and had the support for many years, and then people look at me and they say, yes, you are ready for the NBA. Now, when I step on that court, it'll be intimidating, but not as intimidating as it was before I had did all of this work. So if I am fully actualized human being, or I'm nearing that, let's say I'm at 70% capacity, and then I meet an interdimensional being, I feel like, I can't guarantee anything, but I feel like I want to say that I would guarantee that that would be a different conversation than if I've only reached 10% of human potential dealing with a being that's at 100% human potential, or above 100 plus percent human potential. And now that's going to be a very scary conversation, So
Yeah.
that's going to be very, not scary, I'd say intimidating. But
Well, what you describe, you might go on to that basketball court. It might be unfamiliar, that particular setting, but you have all of that background and all of the many games that you've played, and at least you know what sort of kind of to expect.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
not the individual. I mean, you've never met Michael Jordan before. You've
yeah,
never met a Gray before. But
yeah.
if you have many modes of perception, maybe you can have a meaningful conversation where you begin to explore how you can help each other. Thank
Yeah.
you for that explanation. That's really nice.
Yeah, Superman didn't learn how to be Superman fighting crime. He learned how to be Superman on a farm in Smallville, right? He learned how to
Well
be
done.
he learned how to be a true, loving, compassionate person on a farm in Smallville. And he took that out into the world and became Superman, you know?
With a
So
little help from Lois Lane.
which again was all about love and compassion, right?
That's right.
Not about ego and power. It was like, oh, I have this power. I've learned how to use this power for good and with compassion and love, and now I can reciprocate. I can bring that out into the world and actually do some real good out there.
On that note, how do people find out more about you, more about the games, and so they can, get involved with this?
Yeah, so you can find out more about Psi Games at PsiGamesInternational.com. And Psi is PSI. So PSI Games International.com. So they can find out more about that there. I'm working on a new site called Greater Potentials, but it's not up yet. But they can find me at Hakim, which is spelled Hakim -Isler.com, Hakim-Isler.com. And Scott, if they find this video and they're like, hey, I just want to sign up and be a part of this thing, I'm going to give you a code that you can share, which would give people 20% off of their tickets pricing.
I love it. I'll post it right along with this video, and I'm sure folks will take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Hakeem, this has been a terrific conversation. Any last thought that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I'd say keep striving, keep loving, keep growing with others, right? Find communities where you can have that. Um, and and that's gonna be how we start to progress. And also really get to know yourself, really get to spend some time with yourself, and don't be afraid of who you are on the inside. Go in there and have a deep conversation with that person or that thing that you're struggling with, and hopefully you remove that, and then that'll bring you closer. That's really what this is all about. And I hope people see that. I've gotten mostly great reviews, but I still find people here and there that think that this is about us creating an environment for us to put each other down or think that one is better than the other. And that's just not it. That's just
That's
not it.
not it.
This is about love and compassion. And a perfect example. Sorry, this is my closing note. But I watched it when I was thinking about how the Psi Games could be done. I found a Netflix episode or show on guys and girls who were participating in these Rubik's Cubics games, right?
Oh,
You
yeah,
go
sure.
against each other in those. And there were parents there, and they said, my son had autism or has autism, and he would not come out of his room. He had no friends. He was not interested in friends. He was not interested in spending time in social environments. And we were really worried, and just didn't know what to do. He gets on YouTube one day. He finds out about the Rubik's Cube. He asks them to buy him one. He loves it. He comes out of nowhere one day, comes out of his room and says, can I go to this competition? And they were like, what? My son that doesn't want to be around anybody wants to go to a competition? And they said, yeah, like this is the dream come true. We're going to get you in a social environment. He found a community. Not only is he one of the best now, but he and several other of his friends that he met in the community get together and do these like little parties, Rubik's Cube parties, where they push each other to the next level of what each of them can do. He found love, he found community, he found compassion. He is now doing things that his parents were afraid would never happen. And they weren't sure how their son was going to. And he did that through this competitive environment that people think that it has to be all about, I'm better than you. And really, it's about a way that we can come together and have fun with each other and grow each other. If it is done, if you build a community with love and compassion and collaboration, you will then exude and breathe that into the people who are touched by that. If you build it in anger, fear, doubt, hubris, then that's what you're going to get, and that's not what we're doing.
You're right. And we don't want to go there. Congratulations on this terrific concept. I wish you well and that your community just is huge.
Mhm.
And we have a whole generation of kids that are remembering what their natural state is and what they're capable of.
Yes.
Hakeem, thank you for joining us here at the Afterlife Files.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you.
All right, everybody else, stick around because I've got a real insight I think you're going to listen to. So we'll see you on the deep dive. Of particular interest to me is this concept of mind sight. I have seen young children blindfolded in such a way that they can't possibly see anything out. They're handed an unfamiliar book, and when the children open the book, they are able to read it exactly and to describe in great detail what the images are on the pages. I think that really challenges us about who we are as human beings and how do we remember those capabilities that are in the non-physical universe and bring them into the physical universe. I think that this really challenges us and our ability to think about how we can just flip those abilities on with a little bit of training so that we can do some extraordinary things in this field of human consciousness. I really liked this interview. It was great fun to do. And thank you for joining us here at the Afterlife Files. We'll see you next time.